What is shaking, you guys? Welcome back to Let's Go Win podcast, where we are here to help you be happy, healthy, wealthy, and get better every single day. I have an incredible guest coming on that has built some incredible companies at a very young age. And I'm excited for everybody, including myself, to have this interview. Dan Nevias, CEO of Mode Mobile and creator of the EarnPhone, is revolutionizing mobile with Earn As You Go software, helping millions earn passive income from daily smartphone use. Under his leadership, Mode Mobile saw 32,481% revenue growth from 2019 to 2022, topped Deloitte's 2023 technology fastest 500 in software, and pioneered a fundraising model with 30,000 investors. Now they're aiming for 1 million shareholders while tackling a $1 trillion market. Well, Dan, so good to have you on the show, brother. It's pretty amazing what you're building. I can't wait to hear more about it. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Jam. Really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I mean, I don't know where to start because I don't know much about Mode Mobile. I'm reading your bio and I've read a little bit on you. I'm like, this is pretty cool. How did you even think of this thing? Where did this come from, brother? Why don't you tell me your story of how you got to creating Mode Mobile? I mean, it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, so Mode was created after a series of pivots, I would say. And, I think something that's very common to a lot of entrepreneurs that I'm sure your audience can resonate with. But general idea of it was, we actually had launched a product, and at the time it was like not doing so well, but we had one type of user that was using it a lot. And it was like a music aggregation service, the first version of Mode. And we asked the people that were using it why they were using it. And, their reasoning at the time was like, hey, it has the most amount of music services in one place and it's free. And it was like, well, we found that they didn't want to pay for stuff. And then when we asked deeper, we figured out that they didn't have a lot of money. And so we were like, oh, like, what if we paid you to listen to music? And it was just like a question. They're like, well, I'd be really interested in that. And so, we didn't have that product built. And so we just put a wait list up that was like, hey, like sign up to get paid to listen to media. And we had like 250,000 people that signed up to do that because we created this referral engine. And that's literally changed the entire course of our business direction, right? It was kind of like that concept. And then we did that and found out that it was actually really hard to make money to pay people to listen to music. And so then we moved into other verticals like gaming and shopping and charging your phone and, basically all these things that you do on your phone. And before we knew it, it was like, what we're kind of building here is a operating system for earning based on your mobile habits. And then the next phase of that is that I had this big idea of like, hey, we're going to launch a phone, that pays you, and we're going to call it EarnPhone. And figured out a way to actually make it happen, and we did it with like a 5,000 units. That's all it took at the time. And we just sold it to our users. At the time, we had hundreds of thousands of people. And that's kind of the inception of this business. And, thus far over the last few years, we've been able to facilitate over $350 million in earnings and savings back consumer. We've had over 45 million people around the world use this software. And the company has been able to fortunately bring in over 40,000 shareholders, raising well north of $40 million through crowdfunding and other innovative fundraising tactics. So it's definitely been a journey, to say the least. So, but it wasn't like we created this idea and then we executed it like off of day one. It was a series of pivots and ups and downs.
Well, that's incredible. But man, you look like a pretty young guy here. This is pretty remarkable, something that to have that many people and just this kind of, again, idea of we're going to pay you to listen to music or we're going to pay you to use your phone. I guess that's a hell of a way to get a lot of people to say yes real fast. Let's start with just your age alone, brother. When did you start thinking, you know what? I'm going to be an entrepreneur. This is my path. When did this start for you?
So that started for me when I was probably in middle school. Today I'm 36 right now. But I've definitely made the decision to be an entrepreneur like full time. I think, it was definitely in college where I, tried a couple internships, didn't work out. But in high school, I was, before the whole people started the concept of drop shipping, I was doing the eBay titanium. I was like an eBay titanium power seller, which at the time meant that you were selling over $1 million a year on eBay. And I was doing that out of my room, out of my parents' basement. And I had this great hustle. It was amazing because I grew up between South America and Brazil and Indiana in the US. So two very different places. But you realize all these weird price arbitrages that happen with things, because every time I go back to Brazil, everyone's like, "Oh, please bring me a PS3 or an Xbox," because of the import taxes. Very very relevant to the tariff talks that we're having right now with like the broader markets. Um, and so and there was a delay of when these goods would get into the US. So I usually would buy these items. Like I paid like 20 kids from my high school to wait in line at Walmart and Target and Circuit City and all the stores in my area to wait 30 hours in line so that we bought these PS3s. I paid them $200 each, bought them for 600, and then sold each of them for $4,000 in Brazil. And I made like 30 grand, when I was 17. But I had all these like weird little kind of like unique hustles. And ultimately that then turned into the starting capital I needed to find interesting opportunities buying and reselling goods in the UK and Australia, Brazil. Ran that through high school and then college. And then got into digital, apps and stuff. Met my co-founder on Fiverr, which was like a crazy story in itself. And we still work together today. So, from a $5 gig, it turned into this like crazy, business that we run today. So, at that point in time, around at the end of college is when I really made the realization that, the startup environment, and that's something I just enjoyed to do. I tried to work in consulting and tried to do banking because all my friends were doing it. I was in business school at the time. And I was just like, I remember apologizing to the guys that gave me this great internship. And I was like, listen, I'm just so sorry that I'm like the worst intern that you've ever had. I'm not cut out for this. It's just not me. And they were thankful. They were cool and chill about it. So shout out to A.T. Carney, the consulting firm at the time. And then that's like the day I made that decision, of that. But I didn't know what the entrepreneurship word was in high school, but it was just like a way I was wired, as a person.
Yeah. Fiverr, he meets his business partner, has blown this. I mean, you obviously see opportunities is what I'm hearing. And you also have a vision for something and you're not afraid to go after it. I mean, again, you start talking crowdfunding. All my businesses, I've never crowdfunded. I've never had investors come in. It's such a different world than what I've been a part of. What were some of those learning lessons as you went through it? As you're like, all right, cool, found this cool guy or gal on Fiverr. Now they're my business partner. And now we're going to take this huge idea, go get people to invest a fair amount of money into it, and they're getting a heck of a return, I'm guessing. Yeah. I mean, tell me the story with the Fiverr and how'd you guys bring this all together?
Yeah. I mean, the Fiverr thing was sort of random. This was like really early days Fiverr. So I'm 22 at the time. My soon to be co-founder, who wasn't my co-founder at the time, was 17. He's in high school. And at the time I was actually competing to get into a Techstars. They had a TV show back in the day on Bloomberg. I don't know if it was like, I think it went on for one season. Anyways, I won the competition on it with a commercial that I bought for $5 on Fiverr, way before the AI and all this stuff, right? But made this commercial. I knew a lot about social media and growth marketing, and basically was like spent like $35 all in on this thing. And I was like, and I won this national television show that got me into the final round of a Techstars thing. Ultimately, did not get into Techstars because my startup idea was half baked, so didn't get to sail into the sunset as you planned. But I was like, wow, I was on TV. Spent $35. That was the best $35 I've ever spent. What else can I get on Fiverr? And then I was like, at the time I was had this music website, and it was like the biggest music niche for college students. It was before Spotify had come to the US. It was on desktop, and I had 1 million people a month listening to my playlists, and I was just making money on the ads of these things, but it was all on desktop. And I was like, all these people are now getting iPhones. The App Store maybe came out 3 years before that. And I was just like, I'm going to make an app, And so found this kid that was like, I'll make an app for this, told him what I wanted. And he's like, I can't make that for $5, so I'll make it for $85. And I was like, you know what, man, you got a deal. You drive a hard bargain, but we'll do it. And so we make it. It takes them like 2 months, 3 months to kind of build an MVP, and it's very limited. And then we kind of become Skype friends, you know what I mean? Like, and I was just like, so what's your story? Like, why are you doing an app? And I thought that he was from some developing country where, I was making kind of a narrative of like why he would accept $85 in my brain. And then what I found out is that he's like a high school student, just learned how to code a few months prior, and just wanted to work on a project, but knew that his skills weren't that sharp yet. So he was like, I just want to get something going. And I launched that app and made like 10 grand in a week. And I was like, wow, like what a great return. That was way better than, this one. And then then basically he was graduating that year, and I was like, hey, listen, I have this startup idea, different startup idea from the one that failed in Techstars, was for him to come and we'll build an app builder. So basically at the time I was like, we should make other people so they can build easy apps without coding. And he agreed and actually left the UK, took a gap year, came to live on my couch in Chicago. And we just built this company for a year. Actually did not do that great. Like we were actually made the most amount of money from taking our own app builder and using and kind of like launching like clones of other like popular products at the time. It wasn't sustainable enough for it to be a real company. And he was like, listen, I have to go back to school because I only have 1 year. But I'm down to maybe work on this part-time. And so then like my startup dreams are kind of getting crushed at the time because I'm losing my co-founder. And so the week before he goes, I'm like, listen, I don't know if like this current business model that we currently have makes sense. And, we weren't just like getting the sales there. It was kind of had its limitations, the product. But I had this one idea for this one app. Like might be able to build it in a week if you're down. And then he's like, yeah, like I'll do it before we go through. And it was the first ever Instagram liking app. Instagram had just gotten bought by Facebook. And we figured out that people wanted to get to the popular page. And so I was like, what if we built an exchange system that allowed you to basically like someone else's photo? And if you follow them, you get 2 coins. If you like them, you get 1 coin. And then basically all of those likes would mess with the algorithm to get you to the top of the popular page across the entire world, right? Because this is early Instagram. We launched this and it goes live for 3 hours. The next day I remember waking up and in the Apple report that says like how much money you made said like you made $822. And I was like, in 3 hours? That's impossible. Like, because we had launched a lot of apps. I'd never seen that amount of money in that. Then the next day I see it climbing through the charts, whatever, and eventually gets to the 6th on the entire Apple store. And then the next day I get the report. It's like, you made $11,800, right? And then the next day it continues on. And then before you know it, we're the 63rd highest grossing app. It's like, I remember this because it was like us, Plenty of Fish, right? Owned by Match.com, the Wall Street Journal. Like, so I was like, we were ahead of them. And it made like 20K, right? And then it was just like every day, 20 grand, 15 grand, 18 grand, 20, all organically. And this thing just took. And it made so much money at that period of time that I was like, hey, and he's like in his freshman week in the UK of college, and I was like, I mean, what are your thoughts on if this continues on to drop out of school? And then he's like, listen, the biggest issue is the visa, because at the time he didn't qualify for H-1B. He didn't qualify for any visa besides this one special visa of like people of extraordinary ability. It's called an O-1A visa. And the only way that we could figure out how to get it is if we got a big VC investment and then had like some well-known people vouch for him. And then we'd have a higher likelihood of getting it. And so he's like, if you can figure out how to raise money and do that, I will drop out of school. So then I went out, got a random LinkedIn message from an investor, kind of told him, hey, listen, I don't really need to raise a ton of money, but I will consider, because I need to get my co-founder here. But we're making about $1 million a month, or we're making about, at the time it was about $1 million a month. So, if you give me $1.5 million investment, it kind of needs to be a blank check at these terms. And at the time, they just kind of, we negotiated, they agreed to it. And I was like, all right, dude, we got $1.5 million, like sign, whatever, here are the terms. And they were just like, and so my co-founder dropped out of school, and then we got a recommendation letter. We got Mark Cuban to become an advisor to the company at the time. And he dropped out of school and then moved to the US about 6 months later. And definitely went through a lot of ups and downs and hardships, small exits here and there in this app studio, and learned a ton about ads and monetization. That we launched games with a lot of celebrities. We were like the first people to do a lot of these very unique things. And then ultimately came up with this idea before it ultimately became Mode. So this is like literally a 10-year journey. Like, I'm not kidding. My co-founder and I have been working with each other for 11 years. The story that I'm telling you about the Fiverr thing was not overnight. It was literally probably around 15 years ago, or 14 years ago. But we've been working together just with officially in the capacity of him moving here, like over 11 years. And so it doesn't come overnight. A lot of people think it's overnight. but you learn a lot about each other. You learn a lot of different business models, and then you grow. And every year that you don't fail as an entrepreneur, like meaning like KO'd, like, dollars are out of the bank, like, I think your likelihood of success dramatically increases, right? Because you start seeing the pattern matching of the mistakes you've made in the past, and you de-risk your business, right? So yeah, I mean, that was kind of like the Fiverr saga of all that, of that story.
Unreal. I mean, just I love the fact that you're like, hey man, I don't know, we're making about $1 million a month. What do you think of dropping out? Yeah, I think even as his parent, I'd be like, good idea. Let's get the visa and get you going. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I want to talk about EarnPhone because again, the
Mhm.
idea, I get a report every week on how much time I spend on my phone, and
Mhm.
it's more significant daily than I thought. I will say it's
Yep.
like 5 hours, and I'm like, damn, really? Like,
Yeah.
I don't feel like I'm on my phone, but yet I'm listening to music all the time.
Mhm.
I'm always have my phone going with something. So to get paid for it, yeah, man, sign me up. What does this look like, brother? I'm just
Yeah.
curious because again, I don't know this. I don't know how this works, and if I'm a listener, I'm going, well, yeah, dude, I use my phone a lot too. I want to make money using my phone. Tell us more, Dan.
Yeah. So yeah, you're not alone. I mean, yeah, there's 168 hours in a week for every single person on this earth. 112 if you're sleeping 8 hours a day, like you're supposed to. And then, if you're using your phone, the average right now amongst all generations is about 35 hours a week. 35 to 40 hours a week. So you think about that, and younger generations, Gen Z is closer to 50 to 60 hours a week. So you're on your phone 1/3 to one half your time, and this isn't just like entrepreneurs and business professionals. This is like around the world, right? And so the thesis of this is like, well, if I am spending 1/3 to one half of my waking life, right? And then if you think about the smartphone industry, it kind of breaks down in this way. There's like about 1 billion or so iPhones in the world and about 6 billion of everything else, right? Mostly Android. So Android has a much larger market share. And there's about uh, 6.8 billion people right now that are earning less than $12,000 annually, right? So what type of smartphones that they're getting? Like these are these $100 to $125, $150 phones or less. They're not buying those $1,000, $2,000 iPhones. And even in this country, in the US, like 50% of people are using Android phones that typically are in that 150 subcategory. So the thesis I had was like, well, if you're spending 40, 50 hours a week, and what are you doing on the phones? You're playing games, you're streaming music, you're maybe trading stocks, you're doing shopping, you're doing a bunch of stuff. But these brands are paying to get in front of your attention, right? And so if you can align human attention to data, and data not in the sense of like, let me give you my personal data, but data like how Facebook works. Like when I click on something, it's going to show me more of that type of stuff because it knows that's what I'm interested in. So contextual data, and then action, right? Meaning like, hey, I'm going to play games anyways. And if Candy Crush or TikTok wants my attention, they should pay me for a period of time, and we align incentives, creates a habit, and it's a win-win for everyone. So that's how essentially our business model operates. Is we work with a lot of advertisers. Advertisers want access to your attention. We basically will say, hey, like Jam, we'll pay you this much a day as a reward bonus for 7 days for using this service or for taking this action. If you deposit $5 into Robinhood, we're going to give you $100. And then basically you get $100 to now trade in stocks. Robinhood gets a new brokerage account, and we take a percentage for that middle, opportunity. And so we just do that literally across every facet of your life. Whether it's charging your phone and turning it into like a screen or a lock screen, like everything's opt in. But it allows people to earn and save in a big capacity. And so, that's how EarnPhone operates. And then where we started seeing kind of other crossover into the crowdfunding idea was really this idea of like allowing our consumers to become shareholders in our business. And the idea here is like, the best companies in the world, they have good financials, but they have this other like X factor, and it's kind of like a cult like behavior, So Berkshire Hathaway is a great cult, like, only company to actually go up. I got a little hit over the last 48 hours, just like everything else, but it actually was going up during this entire market turbulence because people like believe in Warren like a religion, right? And then prior to that, you have like Tesla, which has taken a hit most recently, but generally trades at like a 90 some X multiple when Ford trades at like a 6. You know what I mean? So why? And it's like because people believe in that, right? So if you can create consumers and users that not only believe in your product, but also believe in your mission, and you could do that across investor types, then that's really powerful. And so for us, I'm always trying to think of like, beyond just the concept of EarnPhone, if you really distill down what is the business that I'm in the business of helping people earn and save money. Whether you're an investor in my business or whether you're a user of my product, I'm in the business of helping people earn and save money. And so I'm always trying to think about ways that I can improve people's financial well-being, even just by being a shareholder, right? So even for our crowdfund, we created this thing called Investor Club. And it's the idea is to kind of create financial opportunities, partnerships, like content, kind of think what like Tony Robbins is going to do. And he's like, you're going there to like improve yourself and all stuff, but then he's going to create all these like different opportunities to kind of level your finances up, your emotional well-being up, your tax. So, I mean, we're focused more on the finance angle, but it's kind of like mixing the concept of what a mastermind is going to do with being a stockholder and kind of the narrative and North Star of the business, which is helping people earn and save money. Right. That's kind of the thesis of how I think about it.
Wow, that's wild. What has been one of your biggest challenges? Because again, my son probably knows about your product, would be my guess. And again, I didn't prior to having you come on as a guest. And I was like, well, this is really cool. So I guess that's my question is, why haven't I heard about it, Stan? Have I just had my head buried in the sand? Am I not the target market? Where did I miss this? And is that one of the challenges is getting out there?
Yeah.
Just curious.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's actually a great point that you're making, because I think, I feel like that you probably wouldn't have heard about it because you're not in my target market initially. I think like, if people are in the kind of like rewards vertical, they're in my target market, they're going to see our ads in those places. But we've always been very focused on that type of user base. Now, up until like 2022, that was the case. And then when we decided to fully go into the crowdfunding idea, and also like, the way I'm thinking about our business model in the future is much more how like Roku operates, where it like licenses its technology to television makers, right? And that's where how it became a $10+ billion business. I started thinking like, how do I advertise this to wealthier individuals and decision makers at companies without incinerating a ton of cash? And so now we're seeing a lot more sophisticated investors and people finding out about Mode because we're advertising the channels that they're at. So that could be through newsletters, that could be through, the morning brews or the snacks or like these types of like newsletters. And I get hit up like every week, like multiple times from different people like, hey, I keep seeing Mode everywhere. And now that more sophisticated audience that buys stocks isn't necessarily my user target, but is my investor target or decision maker target at those broader companies like a AT&T or a T-Mobile or like a carrier. And so that was kind of a very purposeful decision. And because I knew consumer marketing, like we basically, when you're trying to raise money for a company, you have two options. You have three options. You bootstrap the company, which is ideal if you could do that and just like grow. Then, you raise VC for a company. And that slog is quite difficult. Like sometimes we were successful in doing it at a very early stage. But once you start getting to the Series A and Series B, and what we found, what got me into crowdfunding was like, in 2022, the bottom fell from a lot of the fintech and crypto companies. And that's when like the market flipped. And so a lot of the growth stage investors were underwater. Like the company's going to go IPO. If you already weren't a portfolio company, you weren't going to get any attention. And I was in that like no man's land. I wasn't an early stage company. I wasn't a late stage company. I was doing enough revenue to be right in the like middle. And so I was like, what am I good at? And I was like, I'm good at user acquisition and marketing to consumers. And I need to get a hold of like these higher end individuals. And I need to create a cult. It's like, like in the sense of like a cult, like, following, not necessarily a cult, like a, like we're going to go burn sheep in the wilderness cult. But, so by doing those three things, I was like, if we go down this crowdfunding path, I mean, there's some hassles to it. You have to have audited financials. You have to kind of prepare yourself to be a public company. There's all this stuff. And it was much more than I anticipated, but I was willing to go through it. And then like, it's been amazing. It's like, literally like you're getting tremendous like amount of marketing and exposure, which helps business development. It helps like relationships. It helps credibility. It helps with hiring, like, hiring the best people, because people want to be a part of like, things that have big vision, a big opportunity. And in addition to that, like, you brought on tens of thousands of shareholders that believe in what you believe. And it trains you to be a public company CEO if that's what your ultimate goal is, right? Because without having the ticker symbol there and all that stuff. So if you can create a great business and do that, it's like so powerful in that sense. And you don't have to like, you know, you can kind of create your own terms, you know, because it's not like just one VC setting the terms. So it's kind of like now we have VCs that are investing at the crowdfund terms. Like that's what's amazing. Like it completely shifts the power dynamic. It's like, look, we could take your money, but we have like 40 other thousand people that invest at these terms. So we will give you the best of those terms because you're investing a lot more money, but we're not going to like, you know, do this or it doesn't make sense. You know, kind of like similar to the situation we had 11 years ago where it's like, look, I'm making $1 million a month. If you want to invest, I'm willing to do it at these terms, you know, and it just changes the power dynamic as opposed to like, hey, please give me money. I need the money. You know what I mean? It just changes everything. And so I think that that's what's really powerful about crowdfunding. We're seeing a lot more companies get into it, especially people that are good at marketing.
Yeah, it's again, it's not the world I know or even quite understand, but it's phenomenal to be able to grow as quickly. And I know, again, I love the point you made. It's not an overnight success. Like this is 11 years in the making, specifically with my business partner. It wasn't like, oh, dude, moved from England, we just crushed it,
Yeah.
or the UK, wherever he came
Yeah.
from.
Yeah.
I'm curious, as you had some of the fails, quote unquote, or the things that ideations, the iterations that didn't quite work. What is your mindset, brother? Because it doesn't seem like you're like, oh man, I suck. It failed. We're doomed. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, cool. And then it seems like you have a system or certainly a philosophy to where it's like, all right, that didn't work. Let's try and do this. What does your process look like, or if you have one that
Mhm.
allowed you to say, all right, cool, learn from that, made this change here? Because that's what I'm hearing. And again, I'm looking at my son, my 15-year-old son, who he's been an entrepreneur since he's 3. I've known that. Literally, he's showing his little Shark Tank for his school last night, like what they're doing.
Mhm.
So I loved asking questions for him just to be like,
Yeah.
God, I can see so much of what Trey is going to look like someday in the future, or at least my hope. So I would love for him, when he has these failures or these challenges, to say, all right, cool. How do we get back on the horse and maybe even make it better? What does that look like for you, Dan?
Yeah, I think and I think it's always easier to like to say this versus actually put it into practice, right? Because when you're going through it, it's like so difficult, you know, in it. But for me, it's like um I kind of would like distinct it down. Like I'm gonna get failures every single day and no's every day, right? I always try and like, you know, understand like, okay, what about that? That's like like I try not to dwell too deep onto any one major failure because I know that it's just like something right around the corner, a slight like modification of something. Because sometimes it's also the timing of things. It's like you can have, and I can't control that. You know what I mean? Like, you know, these guys say these once. Like I think Mark Cuban was the one that always says this. Like, you know, you only need to be right once. You know what I mean? And so it's a situation where it's like I've had these like random scenarios in my life, and I'll say they happen once every 5 years. I was like talking to my wife about this like, over the past week, where it's like every once every 5 years, I will have some crazy like kind of out of the box idea that will just take. It will just take and it'll go. You know what I mean? And whether it's like that Instaliker idea, or you know the crowdfund concept or whatever, and it's not like it goes like right away. Obviously, there's work and prep that takes over that 6 months. But and then you'll think, oh, I know everything. Like I'm gonna go and then whatever, and then you just fail and fail, and then you're like, wow, I don't know anything. And so you kind of go through this pattern. But for me, it's like I'm always trying to now at least I'm trying to basically make more calculated risks of like, well, why did that fail? Like, and I, at least speaking for myself, who is, I would say I'm definitely an ideas person and always kind of ideating, is that as I've scaled, my ideas start to break, and they start breaking because I am not bringing on people that can go and execute that idea. So that decentralized approach, like when you're super entrepreneurial, depending on like your trait as that, and at least I know mine, is that you want to kind of control everything, right? And that's why there's kind of like good entrepreneurs from $0 to $1 million, entrepreneurs that are good from $1 to $10 million, and then 10 to 100. It's very rare that you get someone that's like Mark Zuckerberg that's going from like 0 to like, you know, all the way to where he has. But he also had this product that just took, you know, and then the right mentorship and like the foresight to doing that. And there's a lot of founders that can build that bone. But I think that that's probably like the one thing I would definitely, as a takeaway from a young entrepreneur to like now, is I'm really trying my best to find great individuals and also set up appropriate company structures that allow people to take and own, as opposed to me, doing that. And I've done a lot of development work to understand why, like, why is my personality that way? And I don't know if you've ever done like an EQ 360 test and these things of that nature. But I know that difference of myself versus like, others. So I think that's one. And then the second one is like on the failure component, it's kind of like, what's the worst that can happen? Like, fortunately we live in a world that if you fail, as long as you're not doing something like nefarious, you're not like, you're not gonna get the death penalty. You know what I mean? And so it's like, what is the worst that is going to happen to you if you fail? And if you could take that as a learning opportunity, everything in this universe happens the way it's supposed to happen, failures included, right? Because some of the most, like, look, I wouldn't have never gone into crowdfunding had I raised the growth round that I anticipated to raise when I went out for it in February, March. Like, we were meeting with like all those growth stage firms that you certainly know their names, and then didn't get a term sheet closed because we missed the window by 3 months, right? We were on track to hit like, I hit record revenues, but I was going to hit even higher record revenues. And then literally had the best month followed by the absolute worst month 60 days later of my business. And I like had to cut half my staff and all this stuff. And it was like such a difficult time. But had I not gone through that, I would have continued to have revenue concentration. I would have continued to like, move things in like a direction that maybe I don't like, see today. And I wouldn't have gotten into the crowdfunding opportunity, which I think actually is like such a blessing that we went through that, because it's like setting the future and the tone of something I think is very powerful. And so that failure set up a new opportunity in that way. So, there was a dark period, and I'm not going to lie, for 2 or 3 months that summer where I was going through all that, where I was like, wow, like, why is this happening to me? Had like 1 or 2 nights of like night sweat days where my wife's like, hey, like, you need to reset yourself, Dan. And then, you start doing a lot more mindfulness stuff like gratitude journal, meditation, all that stuff. But I think like thinking back into all of that, it's like, get through that. It's okay to be down for like a week or two, but it's happening for a reason, right? And then if you take that mentality and know that it happens for a reason because everything is meant to be in that way, you can grow and really prosper for it because it'll happen the way it's supposed to. And then when you are right once, tons of new opportunities open up.
Yeah, it's such a great point. It's when you're getting your ass kicked, sometimes it's just say thank you. It's like it's the best thing that could have happened, but you don't feel that way in the moment. It's certainly like the night sweats and the like can't sleep, and it's like, dude, it sucks going through it, and yet virtually every time it's happening for you, and that whatever is coming next is that much better than whatever that amazing opportunity was. Mm-hmm. That's what's such a funny thing about life. It is one of those things where God has a great sense of humor. It's like,
literally,
hey man,
the best,
really good sense of humor. Yeah. How's it going from being this kid with these ideas to now? I mean, you're a CEO of a big company. You're doing some cool stuff. What's been some of the biggest lessons that you've learned that you're like, all right? And you talked about development and growth, and I'd love to hear more about that. But what has been like the one thing where you're like, all right, for me to go to the next level, this is what I need to really lean into? Or maybe I'm not even the best, because as you said, there's not a lot of Zuckerbergs out there that can take it from 0 to whatever the heck it is now, however big it is now. What does that look like for you, Dan, where you're like, all right, this is what I'm leaning into to really grow as the CEO of this company?
Yeah. I mean, what that looks like for me right now is like, I'm trying to just read a lot about how other founders went through the next steps that I'm going to do based on the things that I want to accomplish. Right. So for me, it's like, how did some of these companies get so big? You know what I mean? Like, because like there is the situations like the Zuckerbergs of the world where you create a Facebook and it just like has this crazy retention and crazy like growth and all that stuff. But most companies aren't like that, I would say. And then there's other stories out there, and so I've been like really diving into all the different ways. And so one that like really it was interesting to me, and I really stumbled upon it last year, was the idea of like starting a business is way more difficult than buying already a successful business in some capacity. And I think there's actually two major lessons. The one, and this is like one that I would wish I would tell to my 15-year-old self today, which was like, anything that I do, set it up in a way that it can be sold, because a business is an asset, right? I didn't think about it in that way as a kid, because like I never sold my eBay business to anyone. You know what I mean? It was like kind of like, I mean, it was good. I made some money. I made money off of it, but it was essentially a service business. I never processed it in a way, like systematized it in a business so that I can sell it, take the income from that, or buy other people or whatever. So I never thought about it in that way. So it's something I wish I would have done differently. So it's like kind of just an advice. But going back to the former point of, you know, right now we're in actually a really amazing opportunity. Like there's two major things happening. One, we're in this like technological kind of like evolution with, AI and all that stuff. But we're also in this other situation where it's like, there's a transition now from the boomer generation to, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z. And it's the biggest wealth transfer in the history of the world. And in many cases, many of these small businesses, because that generation was very entrepreneurial, don't have successors. And they maybe have created systems, maybe haven't, maybe have created kind of systems that are a bit outdated. But there's a huge transition of that generation of businesses that have been around for 20 or 30 years that people can go out, buy, improve their process, and make a tremendous amount of money. And in many cases, don't even need money to do. So, that's, if I was an entrepreneur today, I'd be thinking a lot about that from a small business perspective. But as who I am today, I see this in a very similar way of like, why do the BlackRocks, the KKRs, these PE shops all focus on this roll-up strategy? And I see like a big opportunity in the app space. I think there's a lot of fragmented businesses in there. And we have a product that today I work with advertisers to send my users to there. And now I'm thinking, well, why don't I send my users to other smaller products that people like to do? This filter app, this health app, this news app, this video app, this television app. And then basically I can create the entire ecosystem in that sense. So we're starting to acquire a lot of assets and build businesses that way. So I've been reading a lot of stories of entrepreneurs that have taken their companies public. And many of these multi-billion-dollar businesses are getting there, not just because they built the best Facebook. It's because they're acquiring great assets that work together. And then they create systems for those companies to operate in an excellent way, which just goes back to the people conversation. I've been trying to think about like, how do I create a company culture that can run without me at the helm of every micro decision? Because I've always been in that kind of like way of thinking of know about every single thing. And I want to know about the things, but at the same time, you need those leaders to be able to continue operating in a decentralized fashion. And so I've been trying to learn from those. So those are the two things that like I'm really thinking a lot about, but they're still relevant to kind of like what I wish I told myself or knew, coming up as an entrepreneur. That the flash in the plan, starting Twitter or Facebook or whatever is not. It's very rare. It's so rare to be able to find that, like, just and hit it like that way, and it's just different. Like you learn all these new things. So those are things I'm kind of thinking about and kind of how the next level of entrepreneurship works from like that 10 to 100 million revenue stage, which ultimately then, in my opinion, goes to the public setting CEOs. And I want to go through it. That setting, I'm just hiring for the people of like that do things great that I don't do, and focus on things that I do well, great, right? Because that's where I can add my most value. It's like, where's like the things that create energy for me that I'm the best at? And that's what I should focus my time on and hire people that are great at those other parts that I'm not, that I'm like a B player at,
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Look, if you don't like it, and B, if you're not great at it, outsource, bring people in, empower the hell out of your leaders. No question about it. You brought up two huge points. The silver tsunami is kind of what he's talking about. It is the boomers that are literally leaving, and it is the greatest wealth transfer. They want to get rid of their business, and there's a great opportunity for the people coming up to take that over at a pretty, actually incredibly reasonable price. And some of these boomers, one thing I'm thinking about is how do we help them exit in a reasonable, like, they built this amazing company. And that's the other thing that I hope happens, because there's this great asset. I want them to get rewarded in that exit. And then the other one is, do you listen to Founders Podcast at all? Is that one of the ones that you listen to?
I do actually listen to that podcast. Not every episode, but it's definitely in my Spotify podcast for you like section I always see. So yeah, like
Yeah,
their stories, right? The Berkshire Hathaway is one I think I recently listened to that they profile.
yeah, the guy is fantastic. I mean, look, he talked about Danny Graves, I think the guy that does Raising Cane's.
Mhm.
To hear his like level of it was really remarkable because there's so many ways to make money. There's so many ways to run a business.
Mhm.
And this guy, Danny Graves, I think that's his name. I hope I'm saying that correctly.
Mhm.
But it was really remarkable how he just was like, look, man, I enjoy cooking up, chicken fingers. Like this is my chicken finger dream. And he still does it today. It's remarkable.
Yeah.
What didn't I know enough to ask you, Dan? You're an interesting guy. You clearly are a visionary. People can feel and see that, or I certainly can.
Mhm.
What didn't I know enough to ask you that you're like, Jam, we got to share this with the audience before we kind of wrap everything up?
I don't know. I think the thing I would leave with is, I've always really not necessarily prided myself or purposely have tried to do this, but I think like many of the tactics that we've taken have been very unorthodox. So like the concept is like contrarian thinking. And it's not like I purposely try and be contrarian just for the sake of being a contrarian. I think that's not right either. Um, but there's not a formula to do anything, and I think like um, you should learn like the reason why people take on certain formulas and like why there's like, why do people go through this, process to raise venture capital? Why do people do coaching? Why do people do? And there's not a process to anything. But you should learn that, but then find yourself, like what's special to you. And I think that for me was like a big question I asked myself for like 10 years. It's like, why do I always find myself in these weird, like, kind of creating my own system scenario? And I don't necessarily have the exact answer for that, but what I do know is that it's always kind of like trusting your gut into that I've never regretted it, in that sense. There's times where I'm like, man, I really wish I would have done that at this time. But ultimately, like we said, there's a reason. And I think that like you shouldn't be comparing yourself to kind of like why you're not on the Forbes 30 under 30. If you're, but, and someone else is, you don't need to go raise money from those people, like, especially now, like start your own thing, find your new opportunity, think differently. And especially with this, like, silver tsunami thing, I think if you're trying to get into running a business and starting a business, you don't need to create the next big tech thing. Like you can buy a great business, you do like $5 million in revenue, and in many cases without any money down. And so I think that's the thing I would leave with is like, like most people use the world, like, and they see it through these lens, right? But there's like a lot of room over here, there's a lot of room over here, to kind of like see what's there. And I think that opened, having that open mind is like the most important thing that you can have as an entrepreneur and as a person really to grow. So that's what I'll leave with.
Yeah. No, I love it. And you said the word. So one thing I've launched is the self program, the self community, because what Dan said, I'm so in alignment with. Look, your authentic self. What is it for you? There is no one way to do anything. And I guess that would be one other question I have for you, Dan. On a daily basis, is there something that you do for yourself that really fills your bucket, that it's like, man, this is my non-negotiable. I do not miss doing this one thing for myself. And I'm just curious. For me, there's a ton of them, but I'm curious if you had one that you're like, this is my non-negotiable. Dan gets this every single damn day. I have to have it.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'd say one that's like a ritual for me because it's such a deep level of thinking, and it has to be a pretty random situation for me not to do it in a given week. But it's actually like I float in a float tank, like an isolation tank, like at least once a week for about an hour to an hour and a half. And for me personally, it's like the deepest thinking I could possibly get into. And I don't know if you've ever watched the Queen's Gambit on Netflix, right? And so there was a scene there where she's like in her room and she can see like the chessboard moving, and it's like almost her visualizing her thoughts. I could visualize oftentimes like my problems or things I'm trying to figure out or really complex thoughts. And I could do it when I'm on a run or when I'm walking. I do those. I go on a very long walks every day. especially, coming to Florida, like that's something I do quite often. But I would say the float tank is a non-negotiable for me every week because it clears my mind, but also has just created so much value in the sense of just being in complete darkness, floating with no sound, and you can you're focused so deeply just in that. And I think some people use it for meditation and resting. I use it for extreme critical thinking. But that is something that has just been tremendously valuable for me over the last, like, I don't know, I started 6 years ago. I used to do it only once a month or once a quarter. And then my whole team would notice. So they'd come back like, this guy came and he's on something, you know what I mean? And then, but like, it seems like he hasn't slept for 3 days. He has a million ideas. And then, my wife now, girlfriend at the time, was like, why don't you do it like every week? Like, you get so much value. And I was like, that's a great idea. And then I did. And I was like, wow, like what a great idea. So I would say that for me is like a one habit thing that has just been amazing.
I love it. I love it. I mean, look, guys, if you haven't done it, it is remarkable. I mean, it's an interesting experience. Some people absolutely, it scares the living shit out of them.
You got to get past the claustrophobia, the claustrophobic nature of it. Once you get past that, it's better. But yeah, like my wife doesn't like it, for example. She's not down.
Well, just to be with your thoughts that deeply, no sensory, like everything's gone. It's just you. It's pretty awesome. So Dan, if people want to, like, they want to be an investor, they want to, be a part of Mode and EarnPhone and all the amazing things, where's the best place for them to connect? Because again, I wish I had known about, I can't wait to tell my son, like he's listening to this podcast and to go check this out. But for everyone else listening, where can they find you?
Yeah. So, we have a cool program right now. If you want to be a user of Mode and also a shareholder, we're giving out $15 in free shares in the company. You can just download our app. If you search Mode or an app or Make Money or anything, I'm sure we're like the first one or two placements for that in the Google Play Store. If you're on iOS or you're interested in becoming an investor, you can go to invest.modemobile.com. And you can learn all about our business. Feel free to call the 1-800 number there to talk to our investor relations team or shoot us an email. I also check these emails, invest@modemobile.com, and would love to answer any questions that people may have.
Awesome. Well, brother, it's amazing. I love how just a humble guy, man, just like a normal, chill, humble dude that's done some amazing stuff. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing all your knowledge. And yeah, man, keep building cool stuff. It's really, really cool. And I'm excited, like I said, to share with my son. I'm so glad I was able to share it with our audience.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Enjoyed the chat.
Awesome. You guys, I mean, look, I didn't know about it. I think it's really cool. His whole approach on this is like, look, you can always get better. You can always learn from, keep ideating and figuring out. And then you hit that one. And clearly he's done it not only once, he's done it a couple times, but it's something to absolutely check out. And also check out the self community. This is something that I want people to invest in themselves. Greatest investment you can make. He talked about Warren Buffett. That's one of his famous quotes. Go into the self community, check it out. We would love to have you. And until next time, remember, your mindset matters. Appreciate y'all. Talk soon.